Coming up on This Week in Cause, the 5th year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, Glenn Beck, and open government. Good evening. Welcome to episode 7 of This Week in Cause. As always, I am joined by my charming co-host, Jonathan Harris.
So charming.
So charming.
So happy to be here again with you, Christina, as always. And we're going to get into the big topic this week. Of course, it's the 5-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. Obama went down there yesterday. August 29th was the exact 5 years to the day after Hurricane Katrina touched down in New Orleans. So the questions that are swirling up consistently, has the government done enough? Has progress been made? What else needs to be done? Is the media covering it enough? Whose fault is all of this? You know, the big topic I want to get to is that it's a mixed bag. People want to say New Orleans is still in dire straits or New Orleans is all better. But no one's really saying that. It's all bad, bad, bad. And there are some positive things going on. There are a lot of great organizations that have been doing work down there for years, even before Katrina hit, and many more started up afterwards. So you've got Habitat for Humanity, you've got St. Bernard Project, a lot of organizations working down there in the 9th Ward. So I think it's important not just on the anniversary, but to keep media attention on this situation, because if it goes away and American eyes are not on it, they won't see what's essentially, you know, as we were talking about before, areas that might still look like a third world country down there. It doesn't quite look like America.
No, it absolutely doesn't. And one of the issues primarily is, are they prepared for another hurricane? Several weeks ago, we had Project Gulf impact in, so we won't reiterate sort of what's been going on with the Gulf crisis as well, but that's where Hurricane Katrina happened, and Hurricane Katrina was devastating, and this time, if something like that were to happen again, we now have oil and chemicals in the water, and you know that can't be disputed. And so what has been done to, 1, educate people in the area on how they can protect themselves, 2, what's been done in terms of evacuation, and lastly, I mean, there's some people who are still homeless. There's some people who don't have a way of getting out of the area, which has been compounded by the Gulf crisis just because of economic reasons. I mean, a lot of people that were depending on shrimping and other industries don't have any income anymore. So I'm really afraid that we haven't, or you know, the federal government hasn't stepped in and said, well, let's set up some preventative measures just in case.
Yeah, you know, Dan Rather had a great op-ed shortly after the Gulf oil spill happened, and he wrote, you know, we're so used to knowing everything in our 24-hour media culture. And he was writing about how much oil is going into the water, we don't know. What are we going to be able to do to stop it? We don't know. What are the long-term health and economical ramifications? And I think what he said as pertains to the oil spill is very similar to how it pertains to Katrina. I'm sure there are people who do know the answers, but most Americans, I don't know what the reconstruction of the levees has been like. I don't know if they are prepared for another hurricane. I would assume the answer is no. I would assume that it's not just, oh, here were the mistakes with the last levees, now we've built them up and we're all fine, and now the Superdome just reopened, the New Orleans Superdome. It's been open again for a few years, but the refurbishings are completely done, and now it's new and better than ever. I think that's highly symbolic, and maybe the same destruction with another Category 5 hurricane wouldn't happen to the Superdome again, but I don't think the 9th Ward or St. Bernard Parish gets quite as much attention as the Superdome is. And, you know, hopefully these questions won't be answered by another destructive hurricane anytime soon. But I think the American people need to know what's going on down there, what we can do to still encourage. You know, this is a major American city. This is something we as Americans really care about. And that brings up, what can Americans still do if they want to help? I don't want to say fortunately, because it's not fortunate, but the Gulf oil spill has given, put more focus on that area. This is an area that can't get a break. And there are still things people can do. There are volunteer opportunities. There are still many organizations that need money to rebuild, and a lot of organizations, as we talked about a few weeks ago with the, or maybe it was last week, with the Brad Pitt Make It Right New Orleans Foundation, trying to rebuild homes and do it in a environmental, sustainable way. So there's a lot of things to pique everyone's interest, and everyone's going to care about at least one aspect of what's going on down there.
We focused on disaster fatigue last week, and we were focusing on Pakistan and what's going on there and how people aren't giving and there's not being attention paid to it, or just recently attention was paid to it. I think Katrina is a situation where we don't seem to realize that very tragic things can happen inside our own borders. And that was a very tragic situation. A lot of people were displaced. Same thing with what happened with the Gulf oil spill. There's a lot of people suffering. And I think we like to ignore that it happens in our backyard. Like, we're a country that, a lot of people still assume we rise above those type of things. Well, we don't. And so I think we need to look at this situation and focus on what we can do, how we can rebuild. And I think we need to put a lot of pressure on the federal government to go down and fix the levees. I mean, this is not something that just affects the people that live in those 4 states. This affects the entire country. When Hurricane Katrina happened, I mean, there were personal displacements, pets were displaced, like resources were totally gone. So it affects the economy. And especially right now when our economy still isn't doing that great, we do need to focus on this area, because we're just allowing people to sort of, go down this slippery slope of, not being able to recover when things like this do happen.
Yeah, and really, this is an area where all of these causes are affected by our political process. So obviously, maybe not so obvious to some people because fewer people lost their lives, but Katrina was a much bigger disaster in the United States than 9/11. 3,000 people lost their lives on 9/11, about 1,500, 1,200 in Katrina, I believe, but the thousands that were displaced, the destruction that it caused to so many lives, both physical, economical, mentally, but due to the political process, due to the election cycle, it doesn't come up as much. And this is not just a Republican issue, but this is for both sides. It's much easier to say, there's a bad guy, they want to strike us, and here's what we're doing to stop it, rather than there's this force that we really can't do anything about, and we may have helped cause in a way, but that's another issue. How are we going to go stop this? That's not something that you talk about in the election cycle, because what happened in New Orleans doesn't make anyone look bad and make you look good. There's no upside to it. I guess that's a good thing, because people can't politicize Katrina, use it to their political benefit like they do with 9/11. But it's a big problem, because that means it's off of our radar. And the more we talk about this, the more we always come back to, well, the media has to cover it, or Americans don't know about it. Because if Americans know about it, they'll want to get involved. They'll want to help. They'll want to volunteer. People who are down there are admiring all the young people who are giving up a year of their lives to work with AmeriCorps and to work with Rebuilding Together and all of these organizations. It's something that people want to do, and you just don't hear about it. And every week we come back to the same issue. Well, if the media covered it, this cause would be on everyone's mind, and it doesn't.
It's fatigue. It really is. And I think part of it is that, like I said, we don't like to recognize issues like this happening in our own borders. And I think the media doesn't cover stuff like this as much as they cover Haiti. I mean, when Katrina happened, there was a lot of media coverage of it back in 2005. It was huge. But, it slowly faded away. And, every year someone will touch upon, it's August 29th, let's talk about it again. And it's a 5-year anniversary. But no one's asking the hard questions, which is, that the levees are not sound. Why did someone not go in over the last 5 years and reinforce them? Why wasn't a disaster management plan put in place? And I know there have been some actions taken, but realistically, if there is a hurricane, and it is a large hurricane like Hurricane Katrina was, they're going to be in a world of hurt down there. And I think it's going to be worse than it was 5 years ago. And so that's my question, is that people have been very generous with their time. They've been very generous with their resources going down and rebuilding. A lot of celebrities have jumped into the area and done things. Why hasn't the government taken the appropriate measures to reinforce what they could to protect people? And it's a big question. And now that we've had 2 crises happen down there in the last 5 years, I think that the Obama administration needs to address this. And even in 2012, this should be an elections issue, because this could happen anywhere. There was was a major earthquake in California. Look how bad the California economy is. Like if it was the big one, we always hear about that living in California, what would happen? Or if something else happened somewhere else in the country, like, well, what resources do we have to apply them in different areas? I think that this is a national security issue. It's just not as sexy as some other national security
Certainly
issues.
not a sexy issue, but maybe we could make it that. We're talking about it because it's the 5-year anniversary. Let's make a commitment to revisit this. We have so many causes to cover.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, so many disasters to cover. We can't do them all every week, but let's make a commitment now not to let this one fade away. This is right here inside of our borders. This affects all Americans. Let's make it happen. Let's try to get someone on, whether it's on Skype or in here in the studio, to really say, this is the deal with the levees. This is what needs to happen. This is what's not happening, and here's what you can do. That's what we need to make happen.
I agree. I think this is one of the primary causes we could focus on because it touches on so many things. There are poverty issues, there are education issues. There's so many things that this touches upon and how people get affected because of the hurricane and because of what happened down there. And so I think that, I agree, we should make a commitment to addressing this on every single show in the future.
Great.
So we do make a commitment to addressing this on every single show in the future.
Wow, every single show? Are you ready to make that kind of commitment?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay, well, get on that. All right, so, we have to move on from Katrina, but we will revisit.
Yes.
Okay, so the next story, unless you've been under a rock, I guess I shouldn't say that. Some people might not know about this. Glenn Beck, Fox News host Glenn Beck, hosted a big event 47 years to the day after Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. That was 1963, right? So 47 years to the day. He says it was unintentional, different issue altogether. So Glenn Beck hosts this big event, says it's a non-political event. It's supposed to be about restoring honor, whatever vague thing that means. Political issue, we can get to that another time. So what we want to talk about is the Special Operations Warrior Foundation, which is the beneficiary of any money raised for from the rally. So we have their website up here, Special Operations Warrior Foundation. You can see their mission statement right here. Special Operations Warrior Foundation provides full scholarship grants and educational and family counseling to the surviving children of Special Operations personnel who die in operational or training missions, and immediate financial assistance to severely wounded Special Operations personnel and their families. So a noble cause. Nobody could argue that. It's come under some criticism. Of course, anything Glenn Beck does, good or bad, I don't think no one's all good or all bad. So, of course, even if you hate Glenn Beck, he's got to do some stuff that's right once in a while, right? So this is a noble cause. It should be noted that they foot the bill for this entire event. So all the money donated went back to their purchasing power first before getting any extra funds. So if donations didn't get that far, they would have actually lost money on this event. I don't think we have any specific numbers. I'm assuming they hit it and did earn some money. So does the money they raised through the Special Operations Warrior Foundation forgive some of the, frankly, political hatred and rhetoric that comes out of this?
In this particular instance, it was very strategic on behalf of this organization to use Glenn Beck and other people. Sarah Palin was also involved. This is a wonderful organization, and these are people that go on the front lines and dedicate their lives to protecting us. And so I'm glad that I saw something in an article. This was their highest earning fundraising event they've ever had. So congratulations to the organization for being able to provide scholarships and all sorts of resources to these families. I criticize though Glenn Beck, Sarah Palin, and these other They are fear mongers and hate mongers. I'm sorry. I don't care what way you say it.
You don't have to apologize to me.
I mean, we have our own. There are other people like that on the progressive side of the aisle. But well, I won't go there. We're gonna stay away from any of that. But they use events like this to tout patriotism and to tout we're about this and we're about that. Well, it's unfortunate that you're using a nonprofit to sort of absolve your sins.
Yeah, I mean, it's so vague. We're not This Week in Politics.
Yeah.
As much as we both are passionate about this, we're going on something else. But the Tea Party issue to me seems, it's so vague what their mission is. It's like, you know what their mission is, and you know it's very anti-Obama, anti-liberal agenda, so it can't help but be politicized.
Yeah.
You know, they say this is not a political event, but if you watch Glenn Beck's show, you're more than likely to be of a certain demographic.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's, you know, it would just be like, you know, Farm Aid is very liberal, a bunch of hippies going to watch Willie Nelson play. If you're a conservative and you hate all those hippie freaks or whatever, I don't think you could argue that, you know, it's not going toward a good cause or whatever cause it is, even if you don't like the Farm Aid package, you know.
Well, I guess we got to talk about who is to blame in this whole situation, because one, it's not the nonprofit at all.
No.
The nonprofit was strategic, and this is a great cause. The news, though, the way they covered it, everything I saw about this was about Glenn Beck and Sarah Palin showing up, and it wasn't highlighted that this organization was benefiting or this cause. This is a problem, and this is a problem. There's a lot of people, I mean, veterans issues are a huge problem in this country. Was that the focus of any of this? No, it was Glenn Beck and Sarah Palin. And I think the organization, I think in the future what would have been more productive is, you know, there are organizations that are nonpartisan organizations that focus on these types of issues, and there's people that focus on, you know, on both sides of the political aisle that focus on these issues. Maybe it would have been better to cast the event in a way that it was more inclusive, just so that, you know, people didn't feel like they were alienated. Because I know, you know, this is something that I support veterans causes. I wouldn't have felt like comfortable going to something like this. And I think that's actually the comments I heard from some veterans organizations that I work with, is that they just, people that identify with this type of cause just would not have been comfortable attending.
But you know what? That might be something to encourage people who would not go to the Glenn Beck rally. It's like, you know what? Support this anyway and show them that they don't need to align themselves with, you know, the Glenn Beck program in order to earn this kind of money. Yeah, but, you know, I'm in this space. I read about causes and nonprofits every day, and as soon as the event happened, the first thing I wanted to do is watch videos of the speeches and watch videos of the people who were there to see if they were racist or whatever. I mean, we want the sensational, I'm not beyond it either. I wanted to see what was going on there. So, not that makes it right, and I wish we were able to hear more about what was going on. Yeah,
and we encourage, if anyone has any information about the event or, you know, what went on there, just let us know. And we know we are glad that this is big, and a lot of times we forget the families that are behind the soldiers that go and defend for us. So,
yeah.
Well, moving on to our last headline. It's a cute story. A London tour company, Unseen Tours, has hired homeless people to act as untraditional guides of the city. Great way to use people that have an intimate knowledge of a city like London. And it positively sprung out of another program that was giving homeless people socks and other resources. What do you think about something like this happening in the United States?
I think two things. One, a lot of people would be offended. They'd say, how dare they exploit homeless people for these uses. And two, I don't think, you know what, let me stick with that first thing. I think a lot of people would be, I feel like it wouldn't be able to stand here because people affiliate, you know, we had Mark Horvath on last week. He talked about, you see the guy at the freeway exit. You don't see all the other people behind the scenes. And that's the story of the homeless people we should be telling in this country. What people would be seeing on these tours, it's like, this is the alley where I shared a crack pipe. You know, that's what people think they're going to see, and we need to change that image. That being said, what they've done here is very clever. Here's a quote from the article. Viv Askeland, 54, pointing down the River Thames to Blackfriars Bridge, says, I slept under that bridge for 6 months. When I slept on my own, I made sure there were cameras around me. So people are kind of talking about their strategies for dealing with homelessness, how to shed light on the issue. And of course, this is such a unique idea, it gets in the news. I mean, this was just in the news last week, and it's stuck around enough, and it's because it's a cute story, because it's a little bit, you know, it would be seen on Reuters in the, like, imagine that, or offbeat news section. So I think it's a good thing. I think we're very cynical in this country, and the whole work ethic, pull yourself up from your bootstraps, mentality we have that if you're homeless, you deserve to be homeless, I don't think it would fly here.
I think this puts a human face on a problem where we start to dehumanize people. You know, having lived in San Francisco, where there is a large homeless population, you know, certainly that's the type of city, such as London, where this would be a very positive program. You know, these are people that, you know, might have lived in the city their entire life. And so this would be a positive way to, you know, humanize people and to bring people together. It's a very unifying type of thing. I do agree with you, though, that we do have a stigma we associate with the homeless, and we don't see what's really happening. And I think it's something where much like Katrina, we don't like to talk about it because it's a problem in our borders, and we're the United States, and things like that don't happen here. They happen other places.
And if you are in England and you watch our show, I've never been there, so let me know if I'm wrong about the homeless situation in the UK as opposed to the United States. I just get a feeling like we're much more cynical and disparaging of the homeless people rather than thinking it's a unfortunate thing that can be fixed. All right, news done. Look at that.
Yes. Moving along, though, to one of our favorite segments, Celebrities and Causes. In dedication to Hurricane Katrina, we're going to talk about the Dear New Orleans album that was released this week. It's a benefit album, which benefit albums have proven to be very successful in these situations. That includes OK Go, Tom Morello, My Morning Jacket, and Steve Earle. And our own Jonathan Harris happened to do an interview with My Morning Jacket that we're going to cut to.
Take a look.
It's nice to go through each place, and what's great about a liaison like air traffic control is they know what is needed in each area, and we can be more effective with our philanthropy.
The group has their table set up next to the merch table, so people in the area are learning about, hey, there's this great group here doing this great thing, and this is what the money's going to. You can kind of draw some lines. There's actually a New Orleans benefit comp that's coming out that we've got a track on that's live with the Preservation Hall Jazz Band from our last tour. New Orleans is like raw magic, raw power, you know, and the music that comes from and out of New Orleans is like the synthesis and meat of like all music in the universe, I feel like. But so with New Orleans, and especially now we've become friends with those guys in the Preservation Hall Jazz Band and gotten to know it even better. It's just become more and more a part of us.
Those guys are so cool. That was fun. I wanted to watch that again. But they talk about, you know, we touched on this earlier, but the power of New Orleans and the culture there, which is as much, we want to show people the culture of New Orleans as much as we want to show people the devastation and how to fix it. So we wanted to point this out. It's not the same kind of celebrity cause thing we normally point out where we analyze if it's a good thing or if it's a bad thing. This is a benefit album for a cause we both care a lot about. So if you want to download it, it's very good, by the way, I have it. It's dearneworleansmusic.org, a benefit album dedicated to the city of music 5 years after the levees broke. $12, you buy, download the album, and let me see, I don't know where the money goes. I'll look that up. By the way, I should mention that the organization they work with, Air Traffic Control, works with many different celebrities and musical artists to kind of hook them up with nonprofits and the causes that they care about. So, you know, a band will say, look, I really want to get involved, but I'm super busy, I'm on this tour, I don't know what to do. Air Traffic Control will say, well, what do you care about? Well, look, why don't we hook you up with these things? And that's why we were covering My Morning Jacket, is because they're giving $1 from every ticket sold on their entire tour to a different local nonprofit in each city.
Well, we've been discussing throughout the various headlines today, especially with our focus on Hurricane Katrina, how citizens as well as the government can work together to rebuild an area. Today we are joined by Alan Silberberg, who is the CEO of Silberberg Innovations and the founder of Government 2.0 LA. Government 2.0 is a movement dedicated to open government, whether it's open data for citizens or encouraging citizens to come up with solutions to fix government at the local, state, and national level. Alan, welcome.
Thank you.
So,
pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, why don't you start off telling us, because a lot of our viewers may not know, what is Government 2.0?
Well, simply put, it's really the applying web technologies and social media to government interactions that all of us have to deal with on a daily basis. I like to joke that we all have to stand in line at the DMV, and maybe one day you can actually go online and take care of it. Well, it turns out in California you almost can now, as long as you don't have a real problem. Some states are not like that. But that's just one example. I mean, really, we're talking about a revolution in how governments look at citizens. Number one, that we're not just like numbers, that we're actually people who understand this technology sometimes better than they understand it, and we're demanding that governments are now responding to us in ways that they never did before. So really, it's about how can these new technologies be brought to bear in a disruptive fashion without disrupting everything.
So what are the top things you guys do? What are the top strategies you have to try and get their attention, show, we're not just numbers, here's what we can do?
Well, the big thing really is a lot of education, trying to help people who are afraid of the technologies that many people take for granted. There's a lot of people in government who have been trained to not look at new technology, to be afraid of using it because if they do so, they'll get in trouble. So there's no culture of experimentation like there is in the business world. There's no sense of, well, that's changing a little bit, but up to now there hasn't been this sort of sense of, well, let's try it. If it doesn't work, we'll move on to the next thing. And so the other part of it is that there's just, how do you get past the sort of the heavy tech discussions and wrap that heavy tech discussion into something that most people can understand? Like, well, you pay your taxes. Do you have to pay them online, or do you have to fill out all the forms? You have to get into the basic things that everyone has to deal with, because we all have our own interactions with government. So technology companies, for example, have one sort of set of dealings with the government. Individual people have a whole other set of dealings, and so one of the tricks, I think, is to make governments understand that one size does not fit all, and that for example, using Facebook to reach one part of the community isn't enough. That they have to use Twitter and MySpace and YouTube and do so cohesively in a way that makes sense and allows citizens to feel like their tax dollars are actually going to something useful.
Well, you hosted Government 2.0 LA back in February, and you had people from across the world actually attend Gov 2.0 LA. Can you talk a little bit about sort of why this has become a worldwide phenomenon? I mean, in my experience, this has only been growing in the last 10 years or so. Maybe you could just tell our audience why this is growing and why it's important.
Well, at Gov 2.0 LA, we had representatives of 5 foreign governments actually in the room, which was pretty cool because it was our first event. The governments around the world have similar structural issues, and many of these governments are operating on technology bases that are 20 to 25 years old, and they're dealing in a real-time problem world. The problems are hitting them 24 hours a day in real time, but the response factor is not there yet. So there's a big emphasis around the world, I think, to start to use some of these newer technologies as prices are coming down. It's becoming more easy to start thinking about things that even a year or so ago you said, well, no, it was too expensive. But now, whoa, that's really come down in price. And then that tied with the fact that you have so many governments in serious fiscal crisis that is actually forcing them to experiment on free platforms that where before they might never have thought of using something like that. So I see the global growth occurring partially out of desperation. That there's just so many non-functional governments around the world, and these technologies offer at least a partial solution to that.
Is there the idea that those of us that are elected representatives are listening to what's going on in this new world, that they're kind of embracing how people are getting involved, not just by writing them letters in the traditional sense, but getting involved in the technology of what we can do?
I think you have a situation right now where there's two very clear camps. On one hand, you've got the politicians who are engaged, who are using these various platforms to experiment and go beyond the sort of, here's a press release, here's what I have to say, and I don't want to hear your comment. So there are politicians who are moving towards taking comments, and what's the policy for that? And then there's politicians like Sarah Palin who take comments and then scrub them. So that you're entering into a whole different area of what's considered a comment, what's considered something that has to be a record.
And how does the dialogue actually work when it comes to a representative or currently a pundit like Sarah Palin, who's still very politically involved? You know, how does it go from a series of tweets going back and forth? Like, what makes a Sarah Palin tweet that much different from a Jersey Shore tweet?
Well, I would argue
you don't have to answer
probably. No, that's okay. I think that the TV show probably does a better job of engaging than someone at her level using Twitter, because you're dealing with live people. You know, it's not like Facebook where you post something and then 12 hours later you see someone like responded. I mean, Twitter is pretty much like who's watching at that moment is who's going to sort of react. But I think there's a whole lot of politicians who are in the non-experimenting phase. Like, they don't want anything to do with it. If they don't hear the word Facebook, MySpace, they don't care.
Because they've got an assistant saying, "Look, we got to do this," and he's like, "Fine, you take take a BlackBerry,
create a website for me. I don't want to deal with it." You know, and so they're missing out. They're missing out on the engagement. They're missing out on turning a one-way conversation really into a two-way conversation, and they're missing out, I think, on tremendous PR and fundraising opportunities. I do believe that in the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to see a tremendous shift away from the sort of traditional TV-based advertising, really more towards online, because the tools have gotten to a price level now where, you know, your average politician can actually start to think about some pretty complex social media strategies and whatnot.
Well, Gov 2.0 is very much based on technology. But how can Gov 2.0 help people that maybe don't have access to technology? We've been talking a lot today about, you know, Hurricane Katrina. And various areas across the country where people might not have the same access to like technology. I'm sure we all sitting here with our BlackBerries and stuff, you know, itching to like check them again. Yes, Jonathan's already on his.
Paying attention.
Not even paying attention.
Doing this.
So how does Government 2.0 also help people that don't have access to technology?
Well, the digital divide is a huge issue. I mean, the digital divide has been an issue, I think, long before it really became the term digital divide. It was always a communications divide. You know, those who had telephones and those who didn't. And now I think what we're seeing is really the digital divide is the people who have sort of the little mini computers, an iPhone or BlackBerry in their pocket, and maybe the person who has a basic cellular phone that might have some limited internet connection and maybe some SMS or something. Clearly, the emergency services reliance on SMS and emergency services in terms of how they can use mobile phones. To me, the mobile phones and this is sort of like a basic social networking device. So even if you don't have a computer, you don't have websites, you have a cell phone. And with the SMS and the basic web capacity, you basically have a social networking device. So the question is, how is it being used? So I think the governments could really turn towards the idea of push out on emergency services as a way to try to help that. Because I mean, clearly in Katrina, we didn't have the ability to say, hit a button and 500,000 people get an SMS message about leave, you know, or whatever it was. And now I think the technology is such where that's a starting point. But clearly, you're at a point now where we're already seeing, you know, companies falling behind who don't have the sort of same technological prowess as their competitor. So certainly apply that on an individual basis, and the same thing's going to happen.
Okay, so let's say I'm an 18-year-old. I can finally vote. I'm totally up with technology, but I mostly text my friends and stuff, and I don't think my representatives are involved enough with a cause that I really care about. Well, I know there's the standard things. I can send them a letter through a website. I can sign a petition. I can tweet at them. There are all these things that we can do but don't know if they actually do something. So if I'm 18 and I'm lost, what do you tell that person?
Well, in terms of reaching out to their elected officials, or
taking what they can do with technology to maybe the next level.
Well, I mean, we've all signed petitions, but how many people realize you can actually go online and create your own petition? I mean, that's one way where instantly you can, you know, take a cause and make it your own cause right away. You know, with your own social network. And I think that the big thing now is that the ability to become super informed on a subject. You know, if you're really interested in something, you pick up your iPhone, whatever it is, and you get informed, and then you get in touch with that elected official, because they're going to respond to people who have something to say. If they get 1,000 letters a day and 999 of them are, hey, you're a really bad congressman and you're a jerk, and then they get the one who's like a really well thought out letter, and you know, someone researched it, that one is clearly going to get a response.
Yeah, you know, the thing that makes me hesitant about that though is because you know, we live in an age where there's so much information at your fingertips, but are you getting the right information or not? It seems to be it's going to be the same kind of noise machine where a lot of the people who are really interested will have the right facts, some will have the wrong facts, and then out of those people, half will believe one thing, half will be the other, and I'm not sure it'll be anything more than, you know, when a gubernatorial candidate would get on a soapbox and a lot of people would scream.
Well, frankly, there's probably not too much difference. I mean, the difference is that we're using a different kind of technology to essentially do the same sort of politics. The only difference is that social media allows this sort of two-way conversation, whereas before, you know, they'd issue a press release or something, and then that was that. There was no reaction. So I think it's up to the politicians to decide, you know, am I going to take comments? Am I going to take comments from all my constituents, or what's the policy going to be? And then how am I going to, as a politician, you know, use these social media tools to engage the people who elected me, you know, in a new way, in something that's meaningful.
For those of you just joining us, we are here today with Alan Silberberg, who's an expert on the Government 2.0 movement. Alan, one question I have, because this is confusing for some people, is there is the open data movement, and then there's what we've been talking about in terms of civic engagement and technology. Can you talk a little bit about what open data is and how
certainly.
that factors in?
And I can see how it would be confusing, and there's definitely a lot of crossover between the two. And in fact, I would argue that pretty much we're getting to a point where, you know, they're going to be the same thing.
Yeah.
Open data really just means that government agencies can allow their information to talk to and relate to each other on the web, and that you don't have to have a login password to go see some sort of transaction about a legislative you know, filing, but you can just do it, and you can share something from Ohio and California, and or that you can share from, you know, the Department of Commerce and something with the Department of Energy, and there's no, like, you don't have to find 5 different spreadsheets and 2 different software programs, and basically the idea is that, you know, at some point there should be some structures that allows this data to sort of flow back and forth, a semantic web, basically. The problem, I think, is just that, like you were saying, there's so much information out there. And it comes down to how people manage it and how people process it. And so if we're focused too much on the sort of open data piece of it without looking at, quote unquote, the user experience, you know, how are people going to relate to all this data? And if you go to data.gov right now, there's over 250,000 data feeds. So most average citizens can't go through 250,000 feeds and figure out what exactly they want.
Explain that by data feeds. What do you mean by that?
So data.gov is an official website that's run by the U.S. government, and it was started about a year ago, roughly. It was part of the Obama administration's initial promises on open government. And so they now have literally like RSS feeds coming in from all these different federal agencies. It's now over 250,000 feeds. So they call them data sets for the open data people.
And there's the website.
Yeah, and so the open data sets, if there's 256,000 or more, I mean, you know, how do you process it? How do you interrelate it? It becomes a beast upon itself if we're not really focused on the people side of it and managing, like, the language of it, and, you know, what are we seeing and how are we seeing it and why?
Yeah, it's the same problem. They say, like, when you go to the drugstore and you have 8,000 different selections of toothpaste, which one do you choose? You want all this information and you're just overwhelmed by it.
Exactly. And so the question then becomes, well, it's great that there's all this information. The real trick is, okay, how do you start to mash it up in new ways that people have never done before, and start to interrelate stuff from the IRS and stuff from the Commerce Department and stuff from whatever department, and suddenly you're looking at a whole new way of looking at stuff. And that's really, I think, that like the golden ticket for a lot of the people behind the open data movement.
I know the Sunlight Foundation has been very prominent in terms of how, especially with Sunlight Labs, they've done pilot projects in terms of mashing up government data, as well as hosted contests. I think Code for America is one of their contests to get people, you know, the tech set involved in Government 2.0. Can you highlight, I mean, you're right in the mix of Government 2.0. Can you highlight some projects that you just think are rad, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Well, you know, it's kind of interesting. There's so many right now that I keep seeing new stuff popping up constantly. I'm excited to see that the federal government's doing a whole series of contests, crowdsource contests to help get new ideas in. And it's really cool to see some of the things that are coming out already from the early parts of the open government movement. You know, the NIH now has some fantastic dashboards for people to track flu, and so and to prevent even the USDA put out something recently for the egg crisis that's going on. And so there's all these like uses that are popping up, and you know, the state of California just recently launched a statewide, I think it's SMS-based emergency system, so that they can basically, if you're in a certain area and your neighborhood's burning down, they can send you a little message to everyone in that area, get out, you know, whatever it is. And then there's lots of really cool stuff that I'm seeing that, you know, where you're taking like a mobile application and a mapping application and you're tying it together. So there's, I think in the next 6 months to a year, we're going to see like an explosion of technology coming our way about this.
Well, you just referenced two applications that are very popular, SeeClickFix and CitySource, in terms of, because I want to bring this back to the local government level, and those are two applications that allow you to go out and if you see graffiti or you see something wrong in your neighborhood, you can take a picture and submit it. So can you focus a little bit on local government and how Gov 2.0 works? Because a lot of the projects that are prominent are federal government projects.
Well, that's because that's where the money's been, or that's where the attention has been, I think, although that's definitely changing. You know, look, state governments are looking at how they can use social media for policing, from a better criminal perspective and also from a civil perspective. And they're also looking at, you know, really everything from new kinds of safety tools and how people just travel down the road safely to you know, really whole new ways of looking at potential alerts for neighborhoods and emergency services. I mean, and SeeClickFix and CitySource are great examples of taking this sort of the cell phone idea and the mapping idea and putting it in, you know, here's your government, go fix your pothole next door. I think when we start getting to a point when you can actually go on your iPhone or your BlackBerry, whatever it is, and do your basic state services, you know, without having to stand in line somewhere and not have to fill in a bunch of forms to the state capitol, whatever your complaint might be. I mean, that's clearly going to be a huge thing. And then the other area is information management and how states relate to each other and how they relate to the federal government.
I think everyone can get behind this if you say, if you're behind this cause, you won't have to wait in line at the DMV anymore. I think that's the number one thing you can say, because I'm on board.
Right, and that's an easy one, although that one's now, like I said, is now becoming passé because there's now enough DMVs that actually have websites that you can do most of your stuff. So now I'm beginning to shift to maybe it's, okay, if you have a lot of paperwork that you have to send in and fill it out, maybe you don't have to anymore.
IRS.
Yes.
For example.
They can make a lot of things easier. Well, we've obviously explored how multifaceted Government 2.0 is, and you are the founder of Gov 2.0 LA, and I know that last year's conference was very successful. As I said, people attended from around the world. Can you tell our audience how they can get involved?
Sure. Gov 2.0 LA, our website is www.gov20la.org. The event is going to be in February of 2011. I'm trying to lock down the venue and date right now, actually. We're going to be doing a lot of things that we didn't do last year. We're really going to be focusing on some of the case studies at state level and local level case studies, and also focusing on companies that are really, you know, trying to not just maybe come up with the next best idea, but actually, you know, where they're getting some traction and showing what's working and what's not working. Last year we did a live feed. It was a very successful live feed, and this year we're going to do a live feed in English and Spanish. So it'll be be able to reach the California audience, but more importantly, you know, Spanish is obviously a critical language to the United States. So, and then, you know, what the other thing that we're really looking at doing is just trying to, you know, continue the dialogue of letting real people have a real conversation, you know, without the sort of scary tech words.
Well, look, we have to move on, but I want you to stick around for our next segment because we get to have some fun.
Okay.
But yeah, we've been speaking with Alan Silberberg. He's the founder of Gov 2.0 LA, and when is it's February 2011?
Yeah, we're working on the final date right now.
Okay, so gov20la.org. You can find out more about the organization. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so Last but
not least,
probably least.
Yeah.
Honestly, probably least is the Cause Wash. This week's Cause Wash comes from the good old-fashioned Coca-Cola company.
Yes.
They have a promotion through their product Odwalla called Drink Haiti Hope, or the Haiti Hope Project. They are donating, Odwalla is donating 100% of profits from its Haiti Hope Mango Limeade to provide training to mango farmers in Haiti. It's going to be a 5-year, $7.5 million initiative spearheaded by the Coca-Cola company. So, $7.5 million to Haitian mango farmers. Great. Can't complain about that. They're doing it by only selling one variety, and it is the Mango Limeade, which I've been trying to find out the ingredients. Very hard to find out. It says mango puree, and I'm not sure what percentage of that is in the product and what percentage of the mango puree is actually mango.
We have to go find a bottle of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really should have gone to Vaughn's down the street beforehand. Oopsie. So, yeah, and in our next show, I'm definitely going to bring one in, and I'm going to try it as well. There's also, are they getting those mangoes from Haiti, or will they ever? I don't know. They don't say, and I doubt it. So what do you think? Cause Wash or no Cause Wash?
Well, it is Coca-Cola. And, as we've discussed, Coca-Cola, has some mishaps around the world in different places in terms of its corporate social responsibility and how it treats the populations in places it has factories.
Accusations of mistreatment of workers, poisoning of local water supplies. This goes not just to Coca-Cola, by the way, but Pepsi, anywhere that produces these low-cost drinks. But again, as we discussed, we could do a whole show on what Coca-Cola is being accused of and whether that's good or bad. $7.5 million, you can't deny that. It's almost a no-brainer that the Coca-Cola company would do something. So given that, is this the best use of their $7.5 million? And is this the best use selling the Odwalla mango puree beverage?
I think they should have attached it to another one of their products that's more popular. I mean, the Odwalla drinks, here's my thing with it, is that they're expensive for the average consumer. So I would rather seen this plastered on the side of a Coca-Cola can.
And they're not that good for you, and frankly, I don't think they taste that good. I mean, that's just my opinion about the product in general. I don't buy Odwalla that much. And is it the same kind of thing as Naked Juice? Is that the same thing?
I think they're in the same category. What do you think about this, Alan?
It seems that maybe they're using a product that they don't, no one's ever heard of to try to use.
I think
maybe
they just
get
invented
some promotional hype out of this. And I would sort of say maybe they should spend some time donating bottles of water and helping the Haitian farmers rebuild enough and put that money to use in a different way. It kind of sounds a little bit like the Inc. magazine popularity contest that's going on right now. About find your influence. There's no influence that's being found there, and I think that this is a similar sort of thing where they're using the fear of what's happened in Haiti, and they sort of, oh my gosh, donate now on your cell phone to sort of be like, oh, maybe we can get this product to sell again.
Yeah, and you just know in a year or two, and God, I hope they don't do this, that they have the Haitian farmer saying, because of the Odwalla mango limeade, I've been able to grow, my crop of mangoes, and I'm sure that's the thing. I'm sure there will be people who benefit from this project, but it just, it looks so cheesy. Drink Haiti Hope, give Haiti Hope.
But I will say, though, because I want to come back to our first Cause Wash, which was just, you were not here, Alan,
right.
But it was a pink KFC bucket of chicken, and the money goes to breast cancer. So there's all sorts of problems with that as a Cause Wash.
I don't even know where to start with that one.
Yeah, exactly. But this is at least a healthier product.
It is a healthier product. It's hard to find such a blatantly hypocritical and ridiculous cause.
We're looking for it, though.
Oh, no. As soon as I find it, as soon as, I can't even think of anything. It has to look fictional. When I first saw the ad, I thought it was fictional. Well, if you are interested in giving Haiti Hope via the Coca-Cola company, you can support the project without purchasing the Mango Limeade by texting the word mango to 50555. A donation of $10 will go to the Haiti Hope Project.
So wait, so let me get this straight. So on one hand, they're plugging their product, on the other hand, they're saying, here's how you can help by making a donation.
Yeah, this project.
But they're not actually talking about a donation that's being made by the Coca-Cola company, at least from what you're saying.
It says the contributions will go toward a 5-year, $7.5 million initiative.
So in other words, they're funding it from the consumers.
But yeah,
right.
so I guess if you don't fund it, they're going to give the rest of the money. Like, it's hard to tell. Are they giving this money no matter what?
Well, if nobody buys this drink, what happens then? I mean, does this thing get funded or not?
Yeah, it's like they have to say, well, I guess you don't want to help Haiti at all because we're not giving the money unless you buy Oddwall's premium
and if,
mango
as you said,
limeade.
since no one's ever heard of it, maybe it's not that good to start with. So maybe now there's a problem.
All right, in 2 weeks when we're back, we're each going to drink one of these.
Yes, we are.
We should do a blind taste test with some other Oddwalla products, and then we should stop promoting them on this show.
Yes,
we're going to be like, this one's delicious. Thank you. All right, well, we have to get going. You want to finish it up?
I will
Sorry.
finish it up.
Go for it.
Well, I'd like to thank Alan for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Coming on the show. We promise next time we'll figure out who's closing this thing up. Well, thank you for tuning in. We covered a lot of things today, and I think that one of our main topics was Hurricane Katrina. So we hope that upon the 5th year anniversary that you take some action of your own, whether it's finding out more about the situation or even volunteering or donating money, because it is still a problem, and it's something that we have to focus on. Make sure to stay tuned for This Week in Mad Men. I'm Christina Gagne, and as always, joined by my co-host, Jonathan Harris. Continue to do well by doing good. Good night.